Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Blog Podcast. Today is Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018. Today I'm going to recap yesterday's Monday night game between the Broncos and the Chiefs. I'll discuss the Le'Veon Bell situation. I will do my power rankings and guess the lines prior to Week 5. I'll do guess the lines college football for Week 6. And then I'm going to switch gears to baseball and talk about the two Game 163s that took place. I'll make my pick for the National League wildcard game, and I'll make bold predictions for the 10 playoff teams. All right, Monday Night Football, one of the best games of the early season so far. I can't believe we're a quarter through already. That's unbelievable itself. The Chiefs come back from 2 touchdowns down to defeat the Broncos 27-23. They're down double digits in the fourth quarter. Gave Mahomes and crew credit. And Mahomes right now is the MVP favorite. 28 for 45, 340 yards and a touchdown. Case Keenum, 21-33, 245 yards and an interception. This was such a great game. Casey's 4-0. Denver's 2-2. And I do have to give the Chiefs defense some credit for holding off Denver in the fourth quarter. All right, Le'Veon Bell reported to the Steelers yesterday, and in all likelihood, unless he's traded, he'll be back to playing Week 7 against the Cleveland Browns. That is big news for the Steelers. I just think that they were desperate, and he finally reported. They're 1-2-1. They have a big game this weekend against the Falcons, which I'll discuss more on the podcast as the week goes on. But the thing is that they're not going to have Bell back until Week 7. Let's say they survive these next couple weeks without him. And don't forget that the Steelers have a bye. So let's say they're 2-2-1 going into Week 7. That's not bad. They just have to beat the Bengals, beat the Browns, and obviously have to win your rematch against the Ravens. You obviously have to hope that the Ravens fall apart a little bit too. So that's big news in the NFL. Power rankings right now for football. The theme of the week is overrated, underrated. I'm going to go from 32 to 132. San Francisco 49ers. I still am dumbfounded that they gave the Chargers a game. To me, they were overrated before the season with Garoppolo because people thought that this was a possible sleeper playoff team. It's not. There's a couple other teams in the next couple that I'm going to mention that fits the description of the 49ers, that the sleeper contender that we all overrated for obvious reasons. And the obvious reason for the 49ers why we overrated them is because of the presence of Jimmy Garoppolo. 31 is the Arizona Cardinals. This is another overrated team. They paid Sam Bradford, and now he's on the bench, and Josh Rosen is now the permanent starter. I think people in the media overrated this team because they have a new head coach in Steve Wilks, who was a very good defensive coordinator with the Carolina Panthers, and people thought that he would be a good coach. Number 30 is the Buffalo Bills. This is obviously another overrated, but people overrated this team because they made the playoffs a year ago, although mostly everybody thought that they were going to be bad this year. But the Bills, I think, knew what they were doing by trading up to get Josh Allen. They did the right thing with everything. But if you're going to just blow it up and rebuild, why not trade LaShawn McCoy and any other veteran assets that you have? Number 29 is the New York Football Jets, who are also 1-3, like the Bills. This is another obvious overrated. I think people overrated this team because people thought that Sam Darnold was going to be an impact rookie quarterback like Deshaun Watson was last year while he was healthy, and Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin III and Russell Wilson were in 2012, and all three of those teams made the playoffs in their rookie years. I don't think people thought that the Jets were going to be necessarily a playoff team. I think people thought that they'd improve on last year's 5-11 mark. I obviously didn't think so. but they're clearly overrated. The next team on the list, number 28, is probably the most overrated football team in the league, and that is the New York Football Giants. People overrated this team because they got Odell Beckham Jr. back from injury and drafted Saquon Barkley number 2 overall. A lot of people think that they should have drafted Sam Darnold instead, or another quarterback instead, or traded down or something. But no, they thought they were a contender and drafted Saquon Barkley. But to be fair, Saquon Barkley is a transcendent player and could be a great running back in this league. That's in defense of the Giants, but this team is very overrated. I said it before the year that them and San Francisco were probably the 2 most overrated teams in the league. Number 27 is the Seattle Seahawks. This is the other overrated team I had along with the Giants and the 49ers. There's one more overrated team I had, but they're probably going to be a little better than I thought. I'll get to them eventually. But the Seahawks belong with the Giants and the 49ers in that very overrated group. I think people overrated this team because of the presence of Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll. Let's face it, the Legion of Boom is gone. Earl Thomas broke his leg. He's done. I think the Seahawks are done. Yes, they're 2-2, but this is a terrible team, and this team probably is going to be worse than I thought, and same with the Giants and the 49ers, because I didn't think Garoppolo was going to get hurt. Number 26 is the Oakland Raiders. They're 1-3. They finally get their first win with John Gruden back under the helm. They probably should be 0-4, but at the same time, you can make a case that this team should be 3-1 or 2-2. They've been in a lot of close games, and Gruden deserves some credit for that. And that's your underrated case, but I still consider this team overrated because they have played over their heads, especially on the defensive side of the football. But the defense was bad last week, but the defense wasn't bad in the second and third weeks. So keep an eye out for the Raiders and possible regression there. And Derek Carr's actually played very well, which I thought he would, because I think Derek Carr is a better quarterback than given credit for. Number 25 is the Detroit Lions. This is a tricky one in terms of overrated, underrated. I'm going to say overrated. I think people overrated this team because people thought that Matt Patricia was actually going to be a good hire. I'm not a Matt Patricia fan. I think he was a replica of Bill Belichick, and Bill Belichick made him look like a good coordinator. In reality, I don't think he was. Number 24 is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is an obvious overrated now. Ryan Fitzpatrick's benched for Jameis Winston. And this team, I think, is headed for the cellar in that division. Number 23 is the Miami Dolphins. This is another overrated. I think they're overrated because they were helped by an easy schedule. Played the Raiders on 1 o'clock Eastern start in the East Coast. They caught the Jets at the right time after a big win for them. And they caught the Titans in a game where Marcus Mariota was hurt. So this is not a good team whatsoever. Number 22 is the Cleveland Browns. I think this is underrated. To be fair, this team could be 3-1, 2-2, but instead they're 1-2-1. But your overrated argument is that Hugh Jackson is just a terrible football coach, which he is, and I expect him to be fired after the season, after the team barely misses the playoffs. But Baker Mayfield's a stud, and that's why I'm going to say that they're an underrated, and I think they'll catch some folks by surprise, and they'll exceed the win total I picked for them. Number 21 is the Houston Texans. Yeah, they finally get their first win, and they have a chance to salvage their season since they host Dallas on Sunday night this week. And I would think that they have a great chance to win, but I'll make my picks on Friday, so I don't want to spoil any picks. And The Texans, to me, I think are a little overrated, although this will probably not look good in a couple weeks if their season's turned around like I think there's a chance. But I think I overrated this team because is J.J. Watt still the guy he was before those injuries? Yeah, he had the monster game against the Giants, but other than that, he hasn't really done much. Number 20 is the Dallas Cowboys. My pick for them is underrated. Their defense isn't that bad, especially when Sean Lee is healthy, but right now Sean Lee isn't healthy. He's hurt. And I really think Rod Marinelli is one of the better coordinators in the league, and he just doesn't get the credit he deserves. He gets a lot out of players that really aren't that great. DeMarcus Lawrence is a stud on their defensive line. They have some up-and-coming guys in their secondary, too. Dak Prescott had a nice game-winning drive against the Lions on Sunday. So my pick for them is underrated. 19 is the Washington Redskins. This is the toughest one to pick in terms of overrated or underrated. Right now I'm going to say underrated. But if they look like the team that played so bad against the Colts, that immediately changes. Alex Smith is a solid quarterback, even though I think he's nearing the end of his prime. They have some good skill position guys, especially at running back and at tight end. I'm not a fan of their receivers. They have some nice defensive players, too. And Jay Gruden's a coach that I think is on the hot seat. Number 18 is the Indianapolis Colts. They're a team that I think is underrated. Yeah, they're 1-3, but they could be or should be 2-2 because their rookie coach Frank Reich messed up and went for it on fourth down instead of punting in overtime. But I think he did that to try to avoid a tie. And I think that Mike Vrabel, I'm going to get to the Titans in a minute, for the same reason I think would have went for it in overtime if it eventually got to a fourth down instead of going for the tie for the field goal. Because I don't think they want ties. And what makes the Colts underrated, I think Andrew Luck is back. He's starting to look better and better by the week. Their defense has been Jekyll and Hyde. But that's a wait and see for them. Number 17 is, ironically, the Tennessee Titans. I'm going to say that this is an underrated, especially if Marcus Mariota plays up the capability. They have so many injuries, but they just continue to find ways to win games. Their defense has played very well. They made some big stops in overtime against the Eagles on Sunday. Number 16 is the Denver Broncos. This is a tough call. They're 2-2, but I'm going to say they're overrated because I just think Case Keenum was a one-year wonder last year in Minnesota. I just don't think he's a good quarterback. Number 15 is the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah, they're 1-3. Wait a minute. I was just going to talk myself into underrated, but they're overrated. Their defense is in shambles with all these injuries. Devontae Freeman banged up. Julio Jones banged up. Matt Ryan's been amazing and has kept Atlanta in all these shootout games. But I just think because of their defense and all those injuries, they're a little overrated, and I'm not a big Dan Quinn fan. Number 14 is the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is obvious. They're overrated. This is probably the most overrated team in terms of preseason Super Bowl contenders. Oh, there's one more I want to get to. That's a preseason Super Bowl contender I think is overrated. But this is an obvious one. Ryan Shazier is absolutely missed on that defense. They failed to address the linebacker position at the draft, or at least didn't pick the right guy, in my opinion. But I could be wrong. And on the flip side, they're getting Le'Veon Bell back, so that's good news, unless they trade him. Antonio Brown has not really been that great. And Juju Smith-Schuster looks like a breakout receiver this year. So that's good for them. And the other overrated preseason Super Bowl contender I have on this list is number 13, the Green Bay Packers. My overrated argument is that Aaron Rodgers just doesn't look right. I think he's playing hurt. I love Aaron Rodgers and think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. But he just looks hurt right now, and I don't trust the Packers defense either. I'm not a Mike McCarthy fan. I think they should have parted ways with him a few years ago. But they ended up making unexpected playoff runs to the division round and to the NFC title game in years where they got off to slow starts. And I think that, and obviously the brilliance of Aaron Rodgers has masked McCarthy. Number 12 is the Baltimore Ravens. I'm going to be honest, this is an underrated for me. I thought this team was going to be a big flop this year in the AFC. I couldn't have been more wrong. Joe Flacco's playing really well, and he's in a contract year as well, so that certainly helps. His receivers have played very well. His running backs have been good. The defense is absolutely great, and there's some guys on the verge of having breakout years on that defense as well. Number 11 is the Minnesota Vikings. They're 1-2-1. I'm not that worried about the Vikings, to be honest. They just have had a hard schedule. But I think what could potentially kill them down the road is overlooking the Bills. If they miss the playoffs, they're going to be shaking their heads over that game. They have a big one on Sunday in Philadelphia. It's the NFC title game rematch. Number 10 is the Chicago Bears. I'm going to be honest, this is an underrated. I kind of killed Mitch Trubisky last week on the podcast and killing the Bears a little bit for not picking Patrick Mahomes, which could still be the right thing to do by not picking Mahomes. But Mitch Trubisky had 6 touchdown passes the other day. That was his best career game. But is he this year's Jared Goff? Time will tell. And obviously Khalil Mack has made an immediate impact on that defense. Number 9 is the Los Angeles Chargers at 2-2. I'm probably overrating this team, but I'm going to say that they're an underrated team because they don't have Joey Bosa right now, and he is a special talent on that pass rush. And once he comes back, that pass rush and that defense as a whole will improve. I'm not an Anthony Lynn fan, so that's your overrated argument, but this offense is just phenomenal. And I think that they kind of ignored the 49ers like how the Vikings ignored the Bills, except that C.J. Beathard is just awful, and the Chargers found a way to win. And hey, if Phil Rivers doesn't throw that pick 6, that would have been a double-digit win for the Chargers. Number 8 is the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think this is an underrated. Blake Bortles is off to the best start of his career right now. I don't think he's going to ever be an elite quarterback, but he might be on his way to a career year. Number 7 is the Cincinnati Bengals. They're an underrated. They found a way to win in Atlanta without Joe Mixon. I have to give Andy Dalton some credit. He led that comeback against the Falcons. Granted, the Falcons' defense is a mess right now with all those injuries that I talked about a few minutes ago. The Bengal defense hasn't been good the last 2 weeks, but their defense tends to play better at home than it does on the road. Number 6 is the Carolina Panthers. To me, they're an underrated. They weren't good in week 1. They looked very improved the next 2 weeks, respectively, against Atlanta and Cincinnati. They have a big one on Sunday against the Giants that they should win. I don't know if they will win for sure. But I'm going to say this is an underrated. The breakout of Christian McCaffrey has been exactly what I thought it was going to be so far. He's been a big factor in the running and passing game and just their offense in general for Carolina. And Cam Newton, to me, is just a winner. Yeah, he has a bad reputation because of things he does off the field, but that guy's just a winner, and he's an MVP winner. Don't forget about that. He won the MVP a few years ago. Number 5 is the New England Patriots. They're 2-2 right now. They're overrated because they don't have some pieces back. Tom Brady really doesn't look right, although he started to look better as that Dolphins game went on, but I think that's a referendum on how bad Miami is. And the main reason why the Patriots are overrated is because of how bad their defense is. I think their defense is so bad. I think they should have went defense in the first round. I like Sonny Michel, and this is kind of a parallel to the Giants with Saquon Barkley in a weird way. Very good player, except Barkley's a transcendent talent. Sonny Michel is not a transcendent talent. And I do think Michel will be a good player for Bill Belichick someday, perhaps this year, but they should have gone with defense in that first round. And I understood the offensive guard pick in the first round because they had a need there. Number 4 is the New Orleans Saints. This is a tough call, but I'm going to say overrated still. I'm still not a fan of what I've seen with their defense. They were a couple breaks away from losing that game against the Giants. If Wayne Gallman doesn't fumble, maybe the Giants win that game. And I have to give Sean Payton a lot of credit. Some of his coaching decisions in that game were phenomenal. And he is a top 5 coach in the NFL. And he's somebody that I really thought the Giants should have found a way to hire after getting rid of Tom Coughlin and obviously last year getting rid of Ben McAdoo. But who knows, maybe if the Saints weren't a playoff team last year, Sean Payton would be coaching Big Blue rather than Drew Brees for another year. But Brees is phenomenal. Kamara's phenomenal. That offense is great. But that defense just is not very good. And I think what made their defense look good last week was the poor play of Eli Manning in that Giants offensive line. I'm sorry. The Saints have to prove it against the Redskins on Monday night next week. Number 3 is the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm going to say this is an overrated too, but that can change with a win over Minnesota on Sunday. Carson Wentz, to me, still doesn't look 100%. This is a team that I think will be better in the second half of the season and should win the NFC East going away. But that's probably going to change in 4 weeks. But right now, the Eagles, to me, are overrated. Number 2 is the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a very hard call. The obvious answer would be underrated because of Mahomes. I'm going to say overrated because that defense is not very good. And what made that defense look good in the fourth quarter yesterday was the choke job by Case Keenum in that Denver offense and by Vance Joseph, who I think is a dark horse candidate to get fired this season. So it's going to be interesting in Denver, but back to Kansas City. Mahomes is great, and everybody loves Mahomes, and rightfully so, but that defense to me is the reason why they're overrated. And number 1 is the Los Angeles Rams. This is hard, and I can't say the best team in the league is overrated. You can argue that about their defense, absolutely, because Minnesota scored on them the other day, and the Chargers scored on them the other day. But I'm going to say this is underrated. I'm going to be fair. That defense is very good. The Vikings are a good offensive team, and the Chargers are a good offensive team. And I just think that first game against the Raiders was a bit of a throwaway because it was the Raiders' home opener, John Gruden, primetime, the whole deal. But I think the Rams are the runaway favorites in the NFC and the runaway favorites to win the Super Bowl. I'd be surprised if the Rams didn't win the Super Bowl at this point. They're just awesome. Todd Gurley's awesome. Jared Goff's awesome. But my underrated argument for them is because I just think their defense is better than it's looked because they've actually faced a couple good offenses in Minnesota and the Chargers. That's it for the power rankings. Now I'm going to do guess the lines for week 5. This should be fun, as it always is. It's my favorite segment to do on the podcast. And then I'm going to follow it up by doing the college week 6 guess the lines. On Thursday night, you have the Colts at the Patriots. I have the Patriots as a 7.5 point favorite. And the Patriots are laying 10. I think that is ridiculous. I think that's too high. The Patriots defense stinks. Andrew Luck is back, or at least almost back. Next you have the Titans and the Bills. I have the Titans as a 4-point favorite at the Bills. And the Titans are a 3.5-point choice at Buffalo. Makes sense. Dolphins at the Bengals. I have the Bengals -7 at home against the Miami Dolphins. And Cincinnati is laying 6. So I was 1 point off there. So, not bad. The Ravens at the Browns. Guess what, folks? I have the Browns as a 2-point favorite. Yes, the Browns deserve to be a favorite in this game. They're home, and I really still don't trust Joe Flacco. So, I picked the Browns to be a 2-point favorite, and the Ravens are a 3-point favorite, so I was off on that one. But although the case for the Ravens being favored is that the Browns can't be favored yet. But meanwhile, they were favored against the Jets. But the argument there is the Jets are bad, the Ravens are good. So, that's that. The Packers at the Lions. I have the Packers as a 1.5-point favorite at Detroit. And the Packers are laying 1.5 points. So that was another correct pick by me. The Jaguars at the Chiefs. I have the Chiefs. This is a tough one to pick. I'm going to say the Chiefs are a 5-point favorite at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the Chiefs are only a 3-point favorite, which to me is just bogus. They are better than the Jaguars. But the argument there is that the Jaguars defense is very good, and Kansas City's defense is not very good. And the Jaguars offense isn't that bad. You have the Broncos at the Jets. I have the Jets as a 1-point home favorite against the Denver Broncos. And the Jets are a 1-point favorite at home against the Denver Broncos. So that's 2 correct picks by me. Falcons at the Steelers. I have the Steelers -3 at home against Atlanta. And the Steelers are laying 3. So that's 3 correct picks. Giants at the Panthers. I have the Panthers -7 at home against the Giants. Panthers are -7. So that's 4 correct picks. Raiders at the Chargers. I have the Chargers -7 at home against the Raiders. And the Chargers are only laying 5.5, so I was 1.5 points off there. The argument is that the Chargers can't be trusted as a big favorite. The Vikings at the Eagles. I have the Eagles -3 at home against Minnesota, and that's what it is. So that's, I believe, 5 correct picks by me now. Cardinals at the 49ers. I have the Niners favored by 3 at home, and they're favored by 4.5. I think that line is a little ridiculous. The 49ers should not be favored by 4 or more points by anybody, especially with C.J. Beathard at quarterback. Rams at the Seahawks. I have the Rams -6 in Seattle, and the Rams are -7. I wonder when the last time the Seahawks were a big underdog like this at home. I have to ask somebody because that's crazy, but at the same time it's not. The Rams are phenomenal and deserve to be big favorites. Cowboys at the Texans. I have the Texans -3 at home against Dallas. And that's what the line is. That's 6 correct picks. And last but not least, Redskins at the Saints. I have the Saints -7.5 at home against the Redskins. And the Saints are laying 6.5, so I was a point off there. So not bad for NFL Guest Lines. I did pretty darn good. I got 6 picks right. I was correct with the Packers giving 1.5 points. I was correct with the Jets giving 1. I was correct with the Panthers giving 7. I was correct with the Steelers giving 3. I was correct with the Eagles giving 3. I was correct with the Texans giving 3. So that's 6 correct picks. So that was pretty good. College football gets the lines. The college ones are harder than the pros. And let's get going with it because these lines tend to move all the time. First up is Georgia State at Troy. I have Troy as a 20.5-point favorite at home on Thursday night. And Troy is laying 15.5. So that was an off pick by 5 points. Tulsa at Houston. I have Houston giving 15.5. Houston's giving 18. Friday, Georgia Tech at Louisville. I have Louisville -3 at home against Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech's a 3.5-point favorite, which that's crazy because I didn't think they would have Louisville as a home underdog to a team that people think is worse than them. So that's surprising. Middle Tennessee at Marshall. I have Marshall as a 6.5-point favorite at home against Middle Tennessee. And that's what the line is. So that was a correct pick by me. Utah State at BYU on Friday night. I have BYU -7.5 at home against Utah State, and they're only giving 2.5. So I was 5 points off there. Alabama at Arkansas. I have Bama as a 36.5-point favorite at home against Arkansas. Bama's laying 34. Number 19, Texas versus number 7, Oklahoma in Dallas. I have Oklahoma as a 10.5-point choice. Oklahoma's laying 7.5, so 3 points off. Kansas at number 9, West Virginia. I have the Mountaineers laying 31.5. They're laying 29, so 2.5 off there. Maryland at number 15, Michigan. I have Michigan -17, and that's what the line is. So that's my second correct pick. Northwestern at Michigan State. I have Michigan State -24. Michigan State's only laying 11.5. Missouri at South Carolina. I have South Carolina -6. South Carolina's only -2. Illinois at Rutgers. I have it as a pick'em. Illinois is giving 3. Tulane at Cincinnati. I have Cincinnati -7.5. Cincinnati's laying 7.5. So that's 3 correct picks. East Carolina at Temple. I have Temple -8. Temple's giving 11.5. So I was 3.5 points off there. Buffalo at Central Michigan. I have Buffalo -14.5. Buffalo's giving 7.5, so that's a touchdown off. Eastern Michigan at Western Michigan. I have Eastern laying 3, and Western's actually laying 3.5. Syracuse at Pitt. I have Syracuse -2.5. Syracuse is -5.5, so it's 3 points off. Boston College at number 23, NC State. I have NC State -3. NC State's -4, so 1 point off. Northern Illinois at Ball State. I have Northern Illinois -5.5. And Northern Illinois is -3.5, so it's 2 points off there. Number 4, Clemson at Wake Forest. I have Clemson -10.5, and that's because of the quarterback situation. Clemson's -16. Number 5, LSU at Florida. Florida's number 22, by the way. I have LSU -6. LSU is only -2.5. So a lot of people believe in the Gators, it looks like. Florida State at number 17, Miami. I have Miami -16.5. Miami's -12.5. Iowa State at number 25, Oklahoma State. I have Oklahoma State -14.5. Oklahoma State's -10.5, so 4 points off. Ohio at Kent State. I have Ohio -13. Ohio's -12.5, so a half point off. Miami of Ohio at Akron. I have Akron -3. Akron's a 3.5-point favorite, so I was a half point off. South Alabama at Georgia Southern. I have Southern -5.5. Southern's -14. Wow. San Diego State at Boise State. I have Boise -7.5. Boise's -14.5, so it's a touchdown off. Navy at Air Force. I have Air Force -1.5. Navy's actually a 3.5-point favorite. Bowling Green at Toledo. I have Toledo -15. Toledo's -20, so 5 points off. Iowa at Minnesota. I have Minnesota -3.5. Iowa's actually a 6-point favorite. South Florida at UMass. I have South Florida -12.5. They're -13.5, 1 point off. Kansas at Baylor. I have Baylor -4.5. Baylor is -4.5, so that's 3 correct picks. Indiana at number 3, Ohio State. Ohio State -31.5. Iowa State is -25, so I was a little off there. Arizona State at Colorado. I have Colorado -13. Colorado's only minus 2.5. That's surprising to me. UL Monroe at Ole Miss. I have Ole Miss minus 36. Ole Miss is only giving 22, so I was 14 points off there. New Mexico at UNLV. I have UNLV minus 8. UNLV is giving 11.5, so I have 3.5 points off there. Old Dominion at FAU. I have FAU minus 12.5. FAU is minus 14.5, so I have 2 points off. SMU at number 12 UCF. I have UCF minus 17.5. UCF's giving 24, so I have 6.5 points off there. Kentucky at A&M. Kentucky is now number 13, which is great for them. I have A&M minus 3. A&M's minus 5.5. UAB at Louisiana Tech. I have Tech minus 3. Tech's giving 8.5, so I was 5.5 off there. UConn at Memphis. I have Memphis minus 27.5. Memphis is giving 35, so I was 7.5 points off there. UTSA at Rice. I have UTSA minus 5.5. Rice is surprisingly a 2-point favorite. Who had Rice favored in a game this year, unless if it was home against UTEP or an FCS team? Or home against San Jose State. Louisiana at Texas State. I have Louisiana minus 2.5. And Louisiana's minus 3.5, so I was a point off. Vanderbilt at number 2, Georgia. I have Georgia by 28. Georgia's minus 26.5, so I was a point and a half off. Number 8, Auburn at Mississippi State. I have Auburn minus 6. Auburn's minus 3, so I was 3 points off there. Number 10, Washington at UCLA. I have Washington minus 16. Washington's minus 21, so 5 points off. Nebraska at number 16, Wisconsin. I have Wisconsin by 18. Wisconsin's minus 20.5, so 2.5 points off there. North Texas at UTEP. I have North Texas minus 19. North Texas is minus 25.5. Number 6, Notre Dame at number 24, Virginia Tech. I have Notre Dame by 6. Notre Dame is minus 5, so 1 point off. Liberty at New Mexico State. I have Liberty minus 3. Liberty's minus 4. Washington State at Oregon State. I have Washington State minus 8.5. Washington State's minus 16. Cal at Arizona. Cal's minus 3.5. But no, Arizona's actually giving 1.5. Utah at Stanford. Stanford's number 14 in the country. I have them laying 16 at home, and they're laying only 5. That's a curious line to me. Colorado State at San Jose State. I have Colorado State minus 12. Colorado State's only giving 3. I think that says a lot to how bad they are. Fresno State at Nevada. Fresno minus 2 at Nevada. Fresno's actually giving 11. That is a lot. Wyoming at Hawaii. I have Hawaii minus 3.5. Hawaii's giving 6.5. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I had Hawaii giving 6.5. Hawaii's actually giving 3.5, so I was 3 points off either way. All right, now I'm going to do my predictions, or before I get to my predictions for tonight and for the playoffs, I'm going to go over yesterday's game 163s. A couple fun games. The Brewers defeated the Cubs 3-1 to win the NL Central. Congratulations to the Brewers. Christian Yelich locked up the MVP award, I think. Corey Knebel gets the win. Justin Wilson gets the loss. Josh Hader with the save. So the Brewers move on to face on the winner of tonight's Rockies-Cubs game, which I'm going to pick in a couple of minutes. And the Cubs obviously move on to the wild card game for the right to face the Brewers. That's ironic. The Dodgers defeated the Rockies 5-2 to win the NL West tiebreaker. As the Dodgers move on to face on the Atlanta Braves, the Rockies go on the Wrigley Field tonight, and they will play the Brewers if they get by the Cubs. Walker Buehler with the win, German Marquez with the loss. Walker Buehler really introduced himself to the big stage yesterday on national TV. He is their ace right now. He's supplanted Kershaw as their team ace, even though Kershaw is still darn good in his own right. And now tonight, the Rockies and the Cubs, 8 o'clock, ESPN, Matt Vasturgeon, Alex Rodriguez, Jessica Mendoza, and Buster Olney on the call. This should be a very fun wild card game between these two squads. Breakout pitcher Kyle Freeland takes the bump for the Rockies. John Lester goes for the Cubs, who's pitched in so many big games in his life. The Rockies' offense is very good, led by MVP candidates Nolan Arenado and Trevor Story. David Dahl is also a very good player in this lineup, who's been red hot of late. The Cubs' offense has been inconsistent throughout the season. That's part of it's due to injuries, and others have been due to underperformances. Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, Kyle Schwarber, and Wilson Contreras have all played in big games in their lives, and so has Daniel Murphy, who they picked up at the trade deadline, and Ben Zobrist. And I think that helps them, especially against Freeland, who's very good, but has never pitched in a big game in his life. Pedro Strop, the Cubs closer, is back for the playoffs, and he took over as their closer after Brendan Morrow got finished for the season. So Strope's going to help that bullpen and lengthen it a little bit. The Rockies have a lot of guys in their pen that have pitched in big games before, but some of them had bad years, like Brian Shaw's had a bad year. Even Wade Davis, I don't think's had that great of a season, to be honest. Other guys have had breakouts in their bullpen, like Scott Oberg and Adam Ottavino. But that said, the Cubs have the big game pitcher in Lester, and Wrigley Field at night is more scarier for a road opponent rather than Wrigley Field during the day, so that's why I think the Brewers sort of lucked out yesterday. But Wrigley Field at night is just magic, and I really think Daniel Murphy will get some big hits in this game. He's been a big game player, especially in Wrigley Field, especially when he was a member of the Mets. And so give me the Cubs to set up the rematch with the Brewers in the NLDS. Cubs 4, Rockies 3. I'm going to pick the American League wildcard game on tomorrow's podcast. Quickly, before I get to predictions for the playoffs, the Twins fired Paul Molitor today. That was a surprising decision. Molitor was the manager of the year last year. I guess that's irrelevant to them. The Twins did not improve on last year. They regressed like many folks like me expected. So I wonder who they're going to hire. You're hearing names like Brad Mills, Brad Ausmus, Joe Girardi. So that's going to be something to watch. So an interesting offseason ahead for Minnesota as they look to try to become a contender again in the American League. And now I'm going to make random playoff predictions for each playoff team. I'm going to start with the National League because the wild card game's tonight. The Rockies, I'm going to say that Trevor Story has multiple home runs, whether that's tonight at Wrigley Field or just throughout in the playoffs. I think he's somebody that is playing really well right now. He originally had the injury in his arm, but he's okay, and he's ready to go. For the Cubs, my prediction is that despite all the turmoil with Addison Russell and a lot of the inconsistency with some of their players throughout the year, I think that they'll end up playing deep into October, whether that is the NLCS or the World Series. I know that Brewers bullpen and Josh Hader scares me if you're the Cubs, but they're just a team with more experience and a team that I think really cares and will play hard for Joe Madden, with a lot of rumors speculating about him being on the hot seat. The Atlanta Braves. Welcome back to the playoffs, Freddie Freeman. I think he has multiple home runs in the playoffs, regardless of how far the Atlanta Braves go. The Los Angeles Dodgers. I'm going to say that Walker Buehler leads the playoffs in wins. What I mean by that is that he will get the most wins of any pitcher pitching in the Major League Baseball playoffs. Well, certainly for starters, but I think it's pretty bold to say of all pitchers too, and I think that is realistic. The Milwaukee Brewers. Josh Hader gives up a home run. That is very bold considering of how well he's played. Anthony Rizzo has a home run off of him in his career, and I think that is a likely candidate to homer off of him. And maybe they get by the Cubs. Maybe somebody on the Dodgers can tattoo him. But I do think he gives up a home run at some point in the playoffs. The American League. The Athletics. Horaceous Familia has a meltdown. Whether that is tomorrow night in the wild card game or if they get by the Yankees in Fenway Park potentially down the road. But Horaceous Familia, I don't think he'll have a good playoff. I just don't trust him in the big spot. He's had some big moments in postseason play before. He had a 6-out save in Game 5 against the Dodgers in 2015. But other than that, what other big playoff moments has Horaceous Familia had? He blown 3 World Series games in 2015. He blew the wild card game against the Giants in 2016. So he is just not a big game pitcher, and I won't be shocked tomorrow if the Yankee offense puts up some runs against Horaceous Familia. Yankees. This is a hard one. There's so many ways you can go with this. There's so many possibilities for them. But I'm going to say despite a disappointing regular season behind the plate and at the plate, I'm going to say Gary Sanchez has a big playoffs and hits multiple home runs. Do I think his defense will be good? Probably not. But I think he will turn around offensively for the playoffs. Wouldn't be shocked if he homers in the wild card game, and assuming they get through Oakland. I can totally see Gary Sanchez hitting multiple home runs throughout the postseason. And I wouldn't be shocked if he had 2 home runs tomorrow, because you just never know in baseball. And what do they say? That's baseball, Susan. The Cleveland Indians. I'm going to say that Shane Bieber will be their second best starter in the playoffs. I think he's had a very good rookie season. He should be a top 10 Rookie of the Year candidate. He stepped in that rotation and done a great job. I think he'll have a good impact in the playoffs. The Houston Astros. I'm going to say, despite having a bad second half, I'm going to say Carlos Correa hits multiple home runs in postseason play. It's kind of like Gary Sanchez, except Correa's been dealing with injuries all year. So is Sanchez, by the way. But Correa really has missed a lot of time like Sanchez. But I do think he'll finally get going in the playoffs. And for the Boston Red Sox, this is a hard one, too. Because there's, like the Yankees and like all these other teams, a lot of possibilities with them. But I'm going to say that they're going to regret not getting somebody like a Zach Britton at the trade deadline, as their bullpen outside of Craig Kimbrell will falter and potentially cost them a series and a bunch of games in the playoffs. And that's it for my predictions for each playoff team. And that's it for the podcast today. I'll be back tomorrow recapping the National League wildcard game. I'm going to pick the American League wildcard game. And I'll go over anything else that happens in the world of sports. I'll also be doing my NBA rankings beginning tomorrow. First, I'm going to start with point guards. And then I'm going to go with shooting guards, then small forwards, power forwards, centers. And I'm going to do team power rankings, coach power rankings, GM power rankings, the top 100 players in the league as we lead up to the NBA season, which starts in, I believe, 2 weeks from today. I hope you guys have a great day, everybody.